Chapter 1, The Discoveries for the Ages. By Ninja Mare. Author's note. Before you get into reading the story, I would like to thank all of you who liked this story, and gave it a thumbs up. Even though this was a spur of the moment, and not a planned FIC, I would like to thank all of you who actually want this story to continue. Hopefully you'll like the future chapters I upload. Rarity wink. It was now close to high noon, and the R.O.V.E.R was still at work in documenting everything it sees, and stores samples of various plants and soil in its carrier capsules. And aside from footage and pictures, and samples of plant life, the R.O.V.E.R unit has also taken photographs of small terrestrial animals that it's come across, which strangely and bizarrely, look like the same type of animals back on Earth. However, there were some clear distinctions between the animals of this new world, and those of Earth. For example, the rabbits that passed by the R.O.V.E.R all have heads that were the same size as their bodies, which were very tiny even for a small creature like a rabbit. In all honesty, it looked like it shouldn't be able to move at all, without great complications. And yet the 4 rabbits that passed by the mechanical beast, seemed to have no trouble in moving whatsoever. Other animals that the R.O.V.E.R has come across also shared some odd body portions, while others seemed to resemble very close to those on Earth. As the machine was making its rounds around the forest, a few birds got a little curious and flown down from their tree branches, and started to circle around the mechanical beast. Some even landed on the R.O.V.E.R and decided to have a nice ride. But when they landed on the machine, the long prehensile tail of the R.O.V.E.R coiled up like a snake, and the ocular lenses on the tip started to examine the birds, causing a few to fly away because of the sudden action, while others just watched the tail in curiosity. A few minutes after the birds have perched on the mechanical beast, the R.O.V.E.R unit found a sizable pond in a small clearing and began examining the area, while its tail entered the water and used its magnifying scope to examine the microorganisms that live in it. But as the R.O.V.E.R continued with its surveillance, something was picked up by its motion monitor as the birds riding the machine flew off. Turning its head unit up to look across the pond, the R.O.V.E.R came face to face with something that shocked its operators on the other side of its camera. Standing a mere 8 feet from the mechanical beast, was something that could only be described as unnatural, a trio of wolves, that were made of wooden material. The 3 arborlupins made their way around the pond, and flanked the R.O.V.E.R from both sides, their wooden maws snarling with what looked like sap drooling from between their teeth. These creates were no bigger than Canadian timber wolf, so to the R.O.V.E.R, which is twice the size of an African male lion, these were fairly small creatures. But since they're an unknown life form, the R.O.V.E.R was taking precautions to ensure that it wasn't damaged too much, so as the wooden wolves closed in on the machine, side panels on its upper body slide open and a small ocular tube extend outward. The wolf on the machine's right lowered its body, as if readying itself to lunge at the ROVER, but the machine's right ocular tube was pointed at the wooden beast, and a thin beam of red light was fired at the ground a foot from the wolf's head, causing a small impact sound, but creating a 1.5-foot size hole that was smoking. The wolf yipped as it hopped back a few paces. The other 2 wolves took the distraction as an opportunity to leap at the R.O.V.E.R, but the other laser projector blasted back one of the 2, while the other was snagged by the tail and flung back to the other side of the pond. The frightened wolf regained its confidence and leapt onto the R.O.V.E.R, and clamped its jaws down on the back of the neck, but its wooden teeth broke on the reinforced steel armor, causing the wolf to howl in pain, before the tail of the mechanical beast wrapped around the wolf's body and slung it off itself. After the scuffle was over with, the 2 wolves that were flung away recovered from their toss, and ran off with their tails between their legs. As for the 3rd wolf, the laser blast to its chest created a gaping hole, with a mixture of sap and a thin-looking lime green fluid oozed out onto the grassy terrain. With the threat now gone, The R.O.V.E.R trotted over to the corpse of the dead wolf, and began examining the wooden creature. The R.O.V.E.R's tail cam began to slither into the cavity no in the wolf's chest, examine the interior, and instead of finding organs, the R.O.V.E.R's tail camera only found vines and small wooden constructs that look like a heart made out of bark. While the machine's tail was examining the insides, the mechanical beast's head camera shifted through its various settings, scanning for body temperatures which came up negative to other types of lenses as it examined the body. A few minutes later and the machine finished its autopsy of the corpse. The R.O.V.E.R cleaned its tail of any fluids, and continued to traverse through the woods. Re-entering the forest, the mechanical beast was plunged into darkness, as the trees were more denser, and the canopy was preventing the sun to even pierce through. Thankfully, the R.O.V.E.R unit is equipped with a night vision, so it's able to move through the darkness of the woods fairly easy. Maneuvering through the trees and the underbrush, the R.O.V.E.R began searching for more interesting subjects, and with the presence of the wooden wolves the mechanical beast was bound to find more interesting life forms. A small rustle from a dense wall of bushes caught the R.O.V.E.R's audio receptors and motion monitor. But what really caught the machine's attention was a dim purple glow coming from the other side of the bushes. The mechanical beast made its way over to the bushes to investigate the source of the rustling and the purple light, but as it approached the bushes something came popping out of the dense shrubbery, and it would forever be marked as one of mankind's greatest discovery. Twilight. So far the trudge through the ever-free forest was uneventful, which was perfectly fine by the unicorn, as she didn't feel like tangling with timber wolves, manticores, or whatever type of monstrous creatures that reside in the forest. The only thing that was hampering her progress through the forest was trying to remember the path to the old castle, as she's only ventured to the ruins only once. I probably should have looked for any sort of map out. Twilight groaned as a bent twig snapped back, striking her on the flank as she moves through a thick brush. It would have made this a lot easier. The unicorn comment as she trudges onward, even if leaves and small twigs get snagged into her mane and tail, and her coat gets matted. Well, in any case, I should be very OOF. Twilight came crashing into something hard. Bringing a hoof to her muzzle, the little unicorn rubbed her sore muzzle. Afterwards she turned to look at what she bumped into. But what she saw, it was indescribable. The thing in front of her, Twilight wasn't sure how to describe what she is looking at. The only thing she could say is that the thing before her is like nothing else she's read or seen in a book. It was bigger than a manticore, at least 2 times bigger, and its body looks like it was covered in armor. But the main thing that Twilight was focused on was the large singular eye that was staring into her own eyes, never blinking. From what she could see of the creature, its body was lean in appearance, but looked to be covered in metallic armor. The creature then trudged through the bushes, its oddly shaped feet pressing down on the bushes, and started to slowly circle around the little unicorn, who was shaking like a leaf as she watches the large creature encircle her. As the creature continues to circle around the pony, Twilight noticed that the tail of the creature was raised and coiled up, like a snake as the tip was trained on her, before 3 slender gray appendages emerged from the tip of the tail, and began to reach down towards her. The little pony flinched and scuttled back away from the tail, but ended bumping into the front legs of the creature, and feeling a slight chilling sensation along her flanks and lower. Looking up, Twilight was once again met with the cyclopean eye of the creature, as it shifts from one odd tinge of color to the next. Twilight then looked away from the creature's soul eye, and watched as the creature's tail reaches out for her. The slender gray tendrils flexing and uncurling as they inched closer to her. No. In that moment, Twilight's horn lit up with magic and she teleported back to the boundary of the forest, where she laid collapsed on the floor, while her breathing became heavy as the mare was in a slight state of panic. "Wah, what was that thing?" the unicorn muttered as she thought back to that singular eye, that tail with those tendrils. A shudder ran down the mare's back as the image of the tail came to her mind. Maybe Celestia was right, I should let her handle this. Once she's recovered from the teleport, and the fright she just had, the unicorn made her way back to the library. And as she trots along the path, her mind keeps going back to that thing in the forest. It was so unusual, so bizarre looking, she's certain that no book in the library would have anything on that creature. I just hope whatever that thing is, it stays in the forest. R.O.V.E.R. The mechanical beast was scanning the area where it came in contact with the unicorn, while the humans back at home base were frantically looking at the footage the R.O.V.E.R. took. So far this was the most incredible discovery that the humans have ever documented, especially when they repeatedly replay the part where the unicorn just vanished in a flash of violet light. After the scientists and researchers stopped gushing over the footage, they then instructed the R.O.V.E.R. unit to search the forest for that unicorn, and carefully observe it from afar, as well as search for other unicorns if they were in the area. The R.O.V.E.R. stopped searching the immediate area, and began to follow the trail that the unicorn left behind. It would probably go unnoticed by any non-expert tracker, but the R.O.V.E.R. was able to scan the slight disturbances made into foliage. As the mechanical beast followed the tracks, it eventually came to a more worn-out path, and after following the path for just a few minutes, the R.O.V.E.R. unit came upon a connection point, with 3 other paths worn into the ground. Each of the paths has various amounts hoof prints padded onto them, but one path certainly has more hoof prints on it than the others. After a brief deliberation, the R.O.V.E.R. started to walk along the trail with the most prints, which suggested to the humans back at home base that a large herd of unicorns must use it, and quite frequently. 20 or so minutes of walking down the trail, the mechanical beast emerged from the dark forest, and found itself surrounded by apple trees. Trotting into the columns of apple trees, the R.O.V.E.R.'s head slowly scanned over each and every one of the trees, noting that the apples looked very ripe. As the R.O.V.E.R. traverses further into the orchard of apple tree, the machine continues to scan for signs of life, but so far, it wasn't picking up anything. But as the machine continues its search, it did come across another interesting sight. A small, rather cutesy-looking tree house. Approaching the tree, the R.O.V.E.R. unit scanned the area, and finding various amounts of smaller hoof prints from the main trail, scattered around the tree. Standing up on its hind legs, and prompting itself up on the tree house's balcony with its front paws, the R.O.V.E.R. unit was able to see into the structure. There wasn't much inside the structure itself, aside from a small table, a very tiny podium, and a simple ladder that leads to the upper part. As the machine scanned the small tree house, the R.O.V.E.R. unit pushed itself off the tree and went back to standing on all fours, but as the machine reoriented itself, a couple of sharp gasps caught the machine's attention, before it spotted 3 new subjects of interest, which caused all the people at home base to go slackjaw.